Welcome to our fourth panel for the day. We'll be talking about technology and litigation as access tools for people with disabilities. My name is Trevor. I'll be moderating the panel today. I'm a former non-full board member. So there are two ways that we're going to talk about increasing access for people with disabilities. The first way is litigation, and then this panel here is going to focus on technology as a way to increase access. So we are joined by two wonderful panelists here. I'm going to introduce them and then get out of the way. I've shortened their biographies, so what I say here doesn't do them justice for what they've done for the disability community. Next to me is Ben Foss. Ben recently completed his tenure as Director of Access Technology for the Health Group at Intel Corporation. Working in the Digital Health Group at Intel, he led a team of industrial designers, mechanical engineers, and software architects that developed mobile computing systems for people with disabilities. His group focused on improving the communication and access to information for all, including those who are dyslexic, like him. The Intel Reader, a product for which he filed the first patent, is currently shipping from Terra Innovations, and you have one here with you, don't you?
I do, yeah.
You do, so you'll see that later on. In 2003, Ben founded Headstrong, a nonprofit corporation with the mission of forming a dyslexic community and encouraging LD people to get involved with the disability community. He holds a joint JD MBA from Stanford University. On your far right is Cynthia Waddell. She is the Executive Director of Law and Policy and Technology Subject Matter Expert for the International Center for Disability Resources for the Internet. That's a mouthful. Yeah. That is a mouthful. Wow. Today, she serves as the accessibility expert for the U.S. Department of State, the UN Global Initiative for the Inclusion of Information and Communication Technology, and the UN Telecommunication Union. She holds a JD from Santa Clara University. So I'll turn it over to them to talk about how they have worked in technology to increase access for people with disabilities. Go ahead.
Thank you very much, Trevor. This is going to be highly choreographed, as we have spent weeks planning this presentation and are completely coordinated with no lack of communication before getting up here. I can tell you that I'm really excited to be here. I'm actually, I might stand up when I present just because I'm a little restless sometimes, and it's hard to keep me in the seat for long. I have a few PowerPoint slides, as we've clearly coordinated, that I could present. I also think it's probably worth doing just a little framing of the issues we might talk about, and I can say one of the things I'm going to focus on, and maybe you have some issues you want to talk about, and then we can kind of just swap back and forth. I'll just start by saying I'm thrilled to see this organization existing, just to start, and then to see you having the types of conversations you're having are incredibly important. I also want to thank the organizers because I was invited here as a technologist. I was brought here as someone coming from Intel. As it turns out, in the interim, there's a job change in my future, and I'm going to be becoming the Executive Director of Disability Rights Advocates. I've been on the board there for 4 years, and I'm going to be stepping into the Executive Director role. Larry Paradis, who you'll see later today, is going to be continuing in his role as President and Head of Litigation, but I'm going to be taking over kind of the boring administrative stuff. So I'm really excited to look at it from both sides. I think probably I'll just step back for a second and see if you want to jump in on anything, Cynthia, and enlighten us.
Well, Ben, it's great to see you, and what was it, 10 years ago?
I think so, yeah.
Yes, okay. I have about a 10-minute comment that I want to make. So when I learned about your PowerPoint, took a look at them, I thought, great, let's start with your presentation.
Great.
And then I have some high-level comments I'd like to make about technology and where we are with that. So.
Splendid. In that case, why don't we go ahead and do it, and I'll just stand up if you don't mind, because I hate to say yeah. So why don't we jump forward with the slides here. So this is an fMRI. It's actually, I'm not sure if you're able to see it clearly from the front there. I'll describe it for those of you who aren't able to see it as well. This is a functional magnetic resonance image of a human brain while reading. And on the image there are two pictures, one on the right side, which is a non-dyslexic person, and in that image there's a lot of activity. On the right side is me, a dyslexic person, and these were images that were taken when I was at Stanford in 2000. And if you were to put your finger up against right above your ear, that's where the temporoparietal lobe is. That's where language processing happens in the brain for the most part. Interestingly, when people are doing sign language, that's where the region of the brain that activates as well. It's the language center of the brain for interpreting communications in linguistic capabilities. I always like to show this image because I like to sort of be as visible as possible as someone with an invisible disability, and try and broadcast that out there, because so often there's sort of a battle going on between love and fear. People love learning, they love access, they want to do things, and they're terrified that people are going to discriminate against them based on their disability status. And I think in the arena of invisible disabilities, you often run into issues that are very different than those associated with visible disabilities. Oftentimes people make assumptions about character or other things like that. I just like to summarize it this way. As a kid, my mom read out loud to me. When I went to college, I would fax my term papers home to her, and she'd read them out to me from home. Turns out we were both looking for some technology to be independent, because she didn't want to have to keep taking the faxes from across the country every time I needed to read something. And that's what got me excited about technology. So what I'd like to do is jump in and give you a little background on some trends that are coming. And if you walk away from my presentation with anything, it'll just being able to wow your friends with a little bit of Silicon Valley tech talk. So why don't we go to the next slide here. I want to talk to you for a moment about Moore's Law. Quick indication from the crowd, show of hands or noise, clapping, whatever. Anyone heard of Moore's Law? Okay, pretty good. So Moore's Law was thought up by this guy, Gordon Moore. Gordon is one of the co-founders of Intel. And basically he noticed something in about 1965, and this was actually the original chart that he drew. And what he noticed was that the number of transistors on an integrated electronic circuit were doubling every 2 years. And he predicted that that would continue. Now, that has a lot of business implications for Intel, particularly because a new facility costs about $3 billion to build one. When they build it, it loses money. But what's going to happen 2 years from now? Its output will double, because the number of transistors that they can fit, they can get twice as many processors out of it. So they build it knowing it's losing money and assume it will make money 3 years in. And it's a big risk. And they continue to invest that way. So what is the implication of that? I'll try and reframe this in a slightly different terms. Think about, if you think about the doubling of something, it becomes logarithmic, essentially. And the speed at which it's happening is actually increasing as you go. So if you took, for example, a plane flight on the Concorde in 1978, and you took the time it took to travel from the US to Paris, and the cost, right? That trip took about 5 hours and cost, I don't know what it says on the slide, let's call it $500, right? 900, look at that. If you did the same trip today, it would take about half a second, and it would cost you about a penny, as a comparison of how much processing technology has moved over that period. Now, that's amazing, right? And everyone's like, wow, that moved fast. But the important part is that it's going to double again. So next year, or 2 years from now, it'll cost half of and be twice as fast as what you just heard. And that's going to continue. Now, why is this relevant? It is relevant in the context of everything you do in relation to computers. I'm talking about cell phones, I'm talking about iPads, I'm talking about everything you touch. The density of memory is getting double, and the speed is getting double every 2 years, roughly. Now, there are physicists who will tell you this is going to run out, and people at Intel will disagree with them, but it's going to continue in certain trends. Let me give you one example of how that plays out. So we can go to the next slide. This is the Osborne Executive. Anyone ever heard of Osborne Computing? All right, Silicon Valley veterans. Osborne was the original personal computer company, and they made a computer that they literally called luggable. You could lug this. And it was about the size of a suitcase. It cost about $2,750. It had very little capabilities. It costs, if you compared it today to your cell phone, right? It was 100 times heavier than your cell phone was. It cost about 10 times as much as your cell phone does today. Its speed was 160 times slower than this cell phone that I'm carrying around in my pocket. And its size, in terms of volume, it was